Alright team, today we're going to be talking about the Midnight Walkers, an upcoming PvPvE extraction looter made by One Way Ticket Studios. The game had a playtest recently that I took part in, and I had way more fun than I thought I was going to, honestly. Fights were fun, loot was neat, and the game shows a lot of promise. And it's because it shows so much promise that I'd like to take some time to talk about what I think they could improve. Keep in mind that as this was a playtest, some of these things may already be on the way or be no-brainers. But since I noticed them, that makes it all the more important to mention them, just in case. In addition to that, some of these are just my opinion or my relative lack of experience with this game compared to others. A system or gameplay choice I don't love at the moment could have revealed itself to be an effective or good decision if I had more time with the game to try it out. That being said, let's get right into it. At number 10, the first thing I'd like to talk about are market improvements. First and foremost, the items are not listed alphabetically. As far as I know, when you click on one of these sections like crafting materials or grinding materials, they are just listed randomly by some ID they have on the back end. So it makes it a pain to find some of these items in the longer lists. The second thing I'd like improved with the market is more filter options. The biggest things being searching for specific modifiers, such as added technical damage or added physical damage or move speed, and some sort of option to checkmark items that can only be used for your class. That way you don't have to click through that entire list of items on the left to decide if you can wear the riot helmet or the casual shirt or something like that. At number 9, a quick quality of life improvement I'd like to see is the option to open up a map in-game of the floor you're on. This would go, an okay amount towards helping people learn the game. As you learn the maps more, you won't need it as much, but sometimes it's nice to just open it up and go, oh, actually this thing is a little bit further away than I thought. For me, it's the staircases. I'm always looking for the staircases so that I can do some degenerate trap garbage in them. And having a map would help me know how close I am, or if I can lead an enemy to them, and just, generically help you not get lost. At number 8, something I'd like to see is a wish list. There are so many things that you can craft in this game, and it seems like every single one of them has multiple unique crafting materials that are only used for that. For example, the bombs created by Lockdown that they can use. They took butane and electronic waste. As far as I know, they weren't used for anything else, and it took me a bit to remember that, okay, these are the things I need for them, or okay, these are the things I need to make bullets, just like gunpowder and metal and stuff like that. Or this is the stuff I need to keep track of to create a masterwork gun, or whatever they're called. So what I think would be really nice is to have an option to wish list or just, make a list of a few items you like from the crafting list that you can check in-game, and they tell you what materials you need to find to craft these items on your list. Or perhaps even when you see the materials inside an object that you're about to pick up, like you open up a computer and there's the electronic waste, it has like a little green check mark that says, hey, this is something you need to craft an item from your wish list. Grab this. And when you see those check marks, you're probably more likely to remember, hey, this is where I found butane on the ground here in these boxes. Anyways, yeah, I just think that would go a long way towards helping you remember to find items. Number 7, and this one, some people aren't going to care about, some people are going to think it's stupid I'm even bringing up, and some people are going to go, yeah, that's right, you tell them. And that is, I think they need to replace the AI art and especially the voices in their game. The art and whatnot in-game when they're just like randomly plastered on the walls is one thing I'm not a fan of, but that's like not as bad since you're not like looking at it as much. But for the vendors, I think they really need to have an artist draw them, and they really need to have somebody voice them. There are not that many voice lines. It can't be that expensive to get voice actors in there to do them, but it just, I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way at a time when when voice actors are really fighting for their lives out here in terms of, getting their rights protected when doing video games or animation or things like that. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way to have them come in here with a bunch of AI voice lines. Some people argue that it's just faster to get it out there, they'll probably replace them later on, but I still want to mention it because there's a chance they don't replace it later on, and I want it to be known that I think they should replace these things. Yeah, I don't know. They just, some of you won't care, but I care, and so I thought I'd bring it up. At number 6, this is semi-related to the wish listing thing, but I'd like to see at least a slight reduction in just the sheer amount of junk there is to loot. Like, it just feels so cluttered. You know, you're collecting wood, which you need to make arrows because you can only buy so many at a time. You're collecting enhanced wood, which you need to create bows because you can't always buy a good one. Or maybe they're too expensive on the market. You're collecting gunpowder to make more bullets because you can only buy some amount at a time and they're just $1 trillion to buy on the market. You know, you're collecting all these different things for different uses, and it just clutters up your stash, it clutters up your inventory in game, it clutters up just like the map because there's just junk everywhere. On top of that, there are items that you don't even want to bring out, you just want to find them and bring them to a grinder. There are items that are only in there to sell, and there's just too much stuff. And I just feel like reducing it a little bit would be helpful. I want to see items that you're grabbing that have a lot more uses in crafting. You know? Maybe we can get rid of butane for the explosive traps. Maybe we could just use gunpowder for those traps and gunpowder for the bullets. That way I'm not collecting a bunch of random materials all the time. You know, we can use metal for more things instead of like iron bars and scrap metal. We just don't need every different craftable to have different specific items when they're generic. It's fine if you have like a legendary gun, take like a specific material that's only for legendary items. But it's not as fine when you have like a bunch of different like common items requiring all these different unique things. It's a pain. And, you know, some of you might not care, like, oh, it gives me more reason to pick everything up, but like, I don't know, it just feels very cluttered to me, and on my end of things, it feels a little annoying. Number 5, and something that may be a hot take, is that at the moment, I don't want them to really worry about balancing characters or stats. I know that during the playtest, everyone was like, "Ugh, Brick is so busty, he just runs me down and kills me." But that could change. People didn't have the best gear in the playtest. People didn't know how to play the game the best way. For all we know, as people get better gear and learn how to play the game better, Brick becomes useless. For example, I was learning how to play it against them a bit more, and so I wouldn't have trouble with generic Bricks who just wanted to run me down. The problem is when I ran into Bricks that knew to hide behind corners and not chase me down. So as people learn to play the game more, it's gonna, you know, ebb and flow in terms of what ends up being OP. And again, not everybody had the best gear yet. So at the high end of things, Brick could be complete garbage, or he could become even more oppressive and unkillable. We just don't know. That being said, if there is one thing I want them to look at, it's Margarita's slows. Because that guy could slow you to a complete halt. And as far as I could tell, he would have to be brain dead to miss the slows on you. So once they start getting more geared and they got their guns, they just throw their AoE slow on you and then another one. All of a sudden, you're a sitting duck for them to just go pew, 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 in and you're dead. And I guess in theory, even if their data shows it's balanced, sometimes you just have to consider if something is fun to play against, even if it's technically balanced. And on the stats end of things, I can already tell some of these things are going to become a problem. I saw a crow that had +2 technical damage and plus physical damage on gloves. That type of stuff is going to scale like crazy if you can roll all of that. But we have time on the game's release before that becomes a huge problem. That is not something they need to focus on right now. They need to make the game feel as good as possible when it comes out so that, you know, while people are still learning the game, it feels smooth and is a great experience. And so that by the time they start to realize, hey, these stat things are a problem, the game is in a good enough, you know, state, foundation-wise, that you can afford to go and fix the stats based on what people are having problems with. If that makes any sense. Next up, might be another hot take, but cheating. You know, I personally didn't see any egregious or explicit cheating in the game, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen or wasn't happening. And what some people don't get is that no matter how hard the devs try, there will always be cheaters. It is a never-ending battle. You aren't going to be winning it all the time. Sometimes cheating is going to be worse until they figure out how to deal with it. sometimes cheating will be better while the cheaters figure out how to deal with their most recent ban wave and things like that. But I think what's important for them to have in terms of dealing with cheating is a period of time at the game's launch where it seems like cheating isn't as much of a problem. If there's a period of time shortly after that where, cheaters are a bit more rampant and then they deal with it and, it starts to go back and forth like that, that's fine. I mean, it's a pain, but it's fine. But I think it's most important that when people launch up the game, they don't end up seeing a cheater and going, well, this is how the game's going to be. So I think the start of the game is the most important time to have some sort of lock on that. And it's okay if it kind of, ebbs and flows after that. And number 3, I'd like to talk about them having a little bit more clarity, specifically on what stats do. Like, I think it was knowledge or mind or something that determined your, quote, skill attack speed. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean I pull out and place a trap faster as lockdown? Does that mean I pick traps back up faster based on my perk into my inventory? Does that mean, Margarita's AoE damage things do more damage? Does that mean the poison from lockdown's trap does more damage? Does that mean, Crow's poison does more damage? It's important to see some sort of scaling on anything with a damage number, even just like a 1.0 P or 1.0 T next to the numbers that show damage to show if it scales, how much it scales, so that people aren't always asking these questions. Next up, I'd like to talk about what's probably the most important thing for me is the combat and control smoothness. Now, this is just a generic, this thing needs polish, but there are a few things in particular I noticed that felt kind of clunky. The first one is that, as someone who played with Lockdown, I noticed that bows and guns have a lot of things that feel really clunky about them, such as having to ADS anytime you want to fire them, with your melee attack being your left-click mouse button. I'd like to see an option to left-click normal fire, right-click ADS, and then have a fire, and then to have a separate dedicated melee button, like V or something that a lot of games use. On top of that, the end lag animation after firing an arrow or a rifle or pistol feels really long, and it's like you basically stun yourself to fire these weapons. So it makes them really hard to use, on top of the fact that they just feel weird to aim and fire. Like, your arrow doesn't always go where you think it's going to. There was an example I had where I, moved my mouse and fired, and it looked like my arrow shot where it was before I even moved my aim. I think that's a network thing, but these things need to be ironed out so that when you lose in a fight, you can actually be like, okay, I made a mistake, not for some reason my arrow didn't even recognize that I moved my bow to shoot at this person. It just shot wherever I was before. And one last thing I noticed, I know I'm talking about really specific things, but one last thing I noticed on this topic is for Margarita, just give them a selection wheel for using their tonics. This whole arrow minigame is cute, but it's also just annoying. It's also not very intuitive your first time playing him. You're looking at him and going wait, what am I pressing to use my tonics? I gotta go left, right, up, down, A, B, start type shit. Just give him a spell wheel. I press my E button, I drag it to one of them, he starts doing the shaking animation, and if I want, I can cancel and put it away. Again, the arrow key stuff is cute, but just make it more usable. Alright, last up, and probably the most important thing, is that they need to decide what they want their game to be early. They need to figure out what they want fights to look like at a high end. They need to find out what they want them to look at in solo versus team play. They need to decide what type of time period it should take someone to, get fully looted. They need to figure these things out early and stick to their guns. Because other games, Dark and Darker, has flip-flopped around on these ideas so much that their player base has become absolutely fragmented into little pieces, and now it's impossible for them to please a large group of people because everybody now has their own subsection or niche of things that they found best for the game. So I think the Midnight Walkers needs to learn from their mistakes and just decide for themselves what they want the game to look at. It's fine if they decide to take some of the player base's opinions into account if it moderately aligns with what they're going for. But if it takes them in a completely different direction than what they want, for example, how Dark and Darker's lead dev, SDF, kept saying random modifiers are something he never wanted to add, he should never have added them in the first place while they come up with other systems. Because once that's what your game is built around, that's kind of what you have to keep it as. So he sort of locked himself into this situation where random modifiers are the game now because A, that's what people expect, and B, that's how everything else is built around. They didn't come up with the systems that would allow them to take them out ever. Anyways, I know that was just one big ramble fest, but these are just some things I wanted to talk about from my experience playing their playtest, and I wanted to get out there what I think they could improve. Let me know if you agree with anything, if you have any differing opinions. I know for a fact a lot of these are just my opinion, so I'd love to hear what you guys think. What do you think they should do for some of these things? Do you think the game felt perfectly smooth and maybe I just didn't have enough time with it? Do you think the market was fine and maybe I just didn't know how to use it properly? That type of stuff. I think the game has a lot of potential and I just don't want to see them waste it. So again, if you enjoyed this, please like, please subscribe, and let me know what you think down below or if there's any other thing you'd like to see me try to talk about. Anyways, take it easy.